Okay, good evening. This is Professor George Lees talking from Kelso in Scotland to John Patterson in East Sussex, and this evening we're going to talk about state-sponsored terror that involves the British monarchies, Arab nations as fundraisers, Jewish intel and Jewish coercion bureaus that implicate all of the American politicians. They get the people that are planted as supposed terrorists in the Islamic menace. What's the name of the world leader that was chucked off the back of the boat, John? The man that died of kidney failure?
Oh, we're talking about
Bin Laden.
Bin Laden.
Yeah, so Bin Laden was designed. The whole of the Twin Towers scandal on 9/11 was the Pearl Harbor for the invasion of Iraq and then the subsequent invasion of Afghanistan as a war against terror, when it is actually a war to sequester the ownership of two of the last remaining free central banks on the globe, and also to dominate the narcotics production units in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the trading of the narcotics into the West to dismember the Western countries and our massive cities. The motive was just to shed shame on Islam and the Middle Eastern countries so that they could be brutalized and that we could do the financial shenanigans there on the last. There were about 5 remaining central banks that were not in private hands at that time. I think they were Cuba, Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan.
On your end, but your mic's cutting in and out.
Yeah, that will be the intel interference. Hopefully at this end it will be okay.
Yeah.
But those are quite sensational issues. And so Greg Hallett was the one that convinced me that the Jews are the masterminds, and you know that there were 4,000 Jews worked in the UN trade buildings, and they were all told by Larry Summers and his coercion teams to stay away for their own safety that day, and all of them did. And on the far bank, after the detonation of the Twin Towers, there were 4 Jewish people openly pictured as dancing around in celebration that the whole project had been completed in such a vicious way.
They were Mossad agents, George.
That's right, and all of that has been openly discussed on the world's media.
Yep.
So the motives are plain. It's simply the Pearl Harbor to brutalize the Middle East again, to take over the ownership of the last half dozen or so remaining central banks that were still in the hands of the independent nations rather than in Rothschild hands and in the cabal that runs the world for profit. They desperately needed an excuse to brutalize Iraq again and then to run in Afghanistan, and that conflict is only just completed, and within the last fortnight we've re-brutalized Iraq for the 3rd time in a decade. It's absolutely cynical. But tonight we want to talk about the involvement of Prince Andrew, who for a full decade in the lead up to that event was the head of the British trade delegation, and his wife. And can you remind the readers of all of the Brits at the top of the food chain who were in America on, was it the 8th of September? Or
well, the top of my head, the day before, on the 10th, you had Samantha Cameron of the Astors, nicknamed Snowy.
Yeah. So that's David Cameron's missus.
Yeah, they were involved with the opium trade. Then you had Sir Paul McCartney's ex-wife, Heather Mills. You had Hillary Clinton, and then you had Fergie.
And Fergie has on the 101st floor a company called Can you remember?
Oh, not off the top of my head.
Let me just scan back.
It was to do with children, wasn't it?
That's right. The icon for it is a little red doll, and that is pivotal in the cynical evidence I want to bring forward.
Okay.
And she's got a little book, and she's pictured on the internet with little red on the front of the book, and it's a children's charity. And as you know, with all of those children's charities and the healthcare charities and the things that they run in sub-Saharan Africa, they're vicious profiteering scams. None of the money ever gets to the destined victims of the horrible things that are happening to people in sub-Saharan Africa. All of it just lines the pockets of these elites. But I want to show the world at my end, because I'm taping it and I've got a camera pointed at my screen, some footage from the Schindler's List film, because the little red doll that Fergie used for that charitable scam on the 101st floor?
Yeah.
Is simply the joke about the woman in red that has immunity from killing in genocide, and that is the girl in red in the Schindler's List movie. I'm going to play maybe 2 minutes of footage there, and you'll hear the soundtrack of it, and the viewers on my end and my video will actually see the image of the girl in the little red jacket with the red boots. Now the joke behind that is that the Israeli hexagram is blue, but the Rothschild's hexagram is red.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I say, George, if they can't hear it on my video, it's mirrored on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, and that's right. That's Smithsonian Kelsonian, I think. Anyway, this is from Schindler's List, and it's right in between the coercion of the woman that was picked to be his girlfriend in a flimsy petticoat, and the scene where they tried to execute the man for not being able to make the... What was it they were making in the factory, where the man could not do it quickly enough, and they took him outside to shoot him, and the gun failed to work as an act of God. You remember that scene?
Yeah, but I can't tell you what they were making.
I think they were making door handles or pivots for doors.
Okay.
Anyway, here's the footage of the girl in red. She's the only survivor in this scene on the Kristallnacht night where the Jews were being killed willy-nilly, and Schindler and his girlfriend were looking down from the top of the town, sitting on their horses, which is part of the religious fraud for 2,000 years. The hippos joke, the fact that everybody in the profiteering in World War II knows about the religious fraud and knows that the only thing that is important in wartime or peacetime is profiteering from the innocents. Here's the girl in red. So the girl is wandering through the streets of the ghetto. The people are being lined up in queues so that one bullet will kill them all. This is the German commandant lining them up in a queue of a dozen people. One bullet goes through their thorax and they're all dead. The little girl in red passes safely by. And it's too traumatic for Schindler and his girlfriend in their tweed jackets to contemplate. So they turn the horses around. The little girl is still walking safely into her own home. Everybody else is in black and white. Off they go on the horses as if it was in a western movie. Little girl in red hides under the bed and she survives the whole traumatic night. Like the little red doll on the 101st floor of what we're about to talk about. If you want to know it, I've discovered Oskar Schindler on the British Business Register in 2014. I can give you details of that.
This is the same elevator family based in Switzerland, Schindler.
Yeah, I can't remember what they are. I just found a person, and they're still registered in businesses in the UK. And I have no idea how innocent or guilty the family were, but I know that Hollywood are having a laugh at the world's expense, because the people that were being culled in World War II were not just Jews. Innocent bystanders, everybody that was poor was taken out, as many of them as they could. It's absolutely ruthless. But I want to show the analogies between that little girl in red. The importance of the red is that red is the colour of the Rothschild hexagram. You'll see it at the top of Andrew Carrington Hitchcock's web page if you go there. And what they did when they created Israel was they just changed it to blue. Yeah, so the importance of the red jacket and the red interaction in these cynical jokes is that it reflects the power base of the world owners who sponsor every side in every global conflict, and they take the profit from it at massive rates of interest. Okay, so back to 9/11, and I'll get the images up of Princess Fergie, and we can talk for a wee bit about what she and Andrew did. So she ran the children's charity. I'll scan down to, it was called the little red doll that is pictured in all of these images I'm showing is now in the 9/11 Ground Zero Museum. It was perfectly intact. It was
like the passport. Do you remember the paper passport that survived?
Yeah. It was found, I believe, by Larry Summers, the founder and funder of the whole shenanigan, the man who coerced even President Bush in the lead up to that, with snuff films and all sorts of scandalous geopolitical crimes that the leaders, that people that were committed to participate, all of them were coerced into full functional activity on that vicious day. I think there were 4,000 people killed. Sorry, how many people were killed?
3,000 or just slightly over, but I mean even 100 is too much. I mean, it makes me sick. I'm getting bad tempered now, George. You've got to calm down. Well, the little red doll was alleged to be discovered by Brian Van Flandern on September 12, 2001. And now I'm scanning down to Prince Andrew's role at the Ministry of Defence, his role as a speaker every year at the World Economic Forum, and his role as the head of the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills, and his role as a leader of the UK trade delegation for 10 years in the lead up to that event. And he then went on right up to, I think, 2011,
before he began to succumb to the pressure that people like you and me began to put on him, with the able danger people across the water helping us out. And I want the people of the world to know that the royal wedding and the involvement of Mike Tyndall, who wed, I believe it's Princess Anne's daughter that he wed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the family members, but Mike Tyndall's wife is who?
You got me there. Someone check up the time.
It may be somewhere on my website, but what struck me as an outstandingly important fact in the whole sad saga when it was told was that when I watched the videos about how the US air bases were used in the same day that the towers were brought down as a surprise to everyone, they were in the middle of an American Air Force drill to protect themselves from just such an event. The Canadians, wasn't it? The Canadian Air Force were involved in a similar thing, and I thought that the Americans were also involved in what their response would be from the south of the country, which is why Tyndall Air Base in Florida was used on the day. And when I learned that Tyndall Air Base in Florida was used, and that Mike Tyndall, one of the heroes of the English World Cup winning rugby team, and a great big strapping bloke who plays rugby for Bath and for England for almost a full decade, and then becomes involved in a royal wedding. But when you hear that there's a Tyndall Air Base involved in the shameful killing of 3,000 people in a premeditated gesture to take NATO to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that you learn that Heather Mills, the Beatles' boyfriends, that monarchs at this level and that world leaders are involved. The leaders, I'm led to believe, of the US Air Force were taken out of the country so that they could not be implicated in the execution of the deal. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
So can I just read off some of the stuff from my website? It's actually plagiarized directly from Able Danger, who have exposed these people as mass murderers and genocidal profiteers. Can I just read some of the Able Danger footage?
Definitely, yeah.
Ferguson Foundation, based in Toronto, serve, in brackets, exploit and extort children and families in dire need. China, Japan, Poland, Mexico and cities across the United States filmed offering access to Prince Andrew for £500,000. Heard to say, £5,000 when you can to me, open doors. She is seen taking away a briefcase containing $40,000 in cash. The Prince Andrew, Duke of York, born 19th February 1960, second son, third child of Queen Elizabeth II, and he's not actually Prince Philip. I forget who sired him. Was it Porchester or Plunkett?
Oh, there's so many. Could be any of them.
Well, the first two were genuinely Prince Philip's, according to Greg Hallett, but he is a bastard. He's illegitimate. I think it was one of the triumvirate. It was either Plunkett or
Sister.
What was the first name I said? Porchester.
Yeah.
So it was one of those two, because of Prince Philip's deviancy. He had been kicked out of the bedroom when they were on tour in Australia, only 2 years into the marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so Prince Andrew, Duke of York, is the special representative for international trade and investment for the United Kingdom at trade fairs all over the world. He took over from His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, the world's leading Freemason at that time, in this role in 2001. Yeah. And 1979, Royal Naval College flight, signed on for 12 years from 11th May 1979. 1980, took the Royal Marines Greenberry Commando course, Invincible, serve as a Sea King helicopter co-pilot, anti-submarine warfare and anti-surface warfare, Exocet missile decoy, casualty evacuation, transport and search and air and rescue. Brief assignments to HMS Illustrious, RNES Culdrose and Joint Services School of Intelligence. So he's in the spy sector, he's in the military, he's in the trade delegation. And he's been in that right up to 2011, I believe. Flagship.
Can I just say something, George?
Yeah.
A friend of mine who used to play professional football for Blackpool, his son works on the Illustrious, or did work on the Illustrious.
That was with Andrew?
Yeah, yeah.
Alright.
Go on.
Well, it is stunning to know that people at this level of society can be directly involved in a laugh at the terror dead's expense. It is no surprise to know that the royals are in league with the corrupted politicians and the money lenders that have led the world to war for hundreds of years. How long is it since the Five Arrows separated and left Frankfurt?
Oh, we're going back 150 years.
Oh, it's more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
So 1815 they were already well gone, and that was when the British central bank went. And what was the revolution in France was 1789.
Yeah, that's going back.
Yeah, and then they were already into America when you had the American Wars of Independence and the American Revolution. So, you know, it is really ancient what they do, and what they did this for, we've explained at the beginning of the interview, and it's just disappointing that I can't find the name of Fergie's company, but, you know, the companies that delivered the dirty in Iraq are the same companies that are involved. Halliburton were involved, I'm led to believe. There's a lot of speculation about whether drones were used or whether they were actually real planes, but there's very little doubt in my mind that there was a detonation when all the people had been entrapped in the buildings high up in the stories and the infrastructure in the building was completely wrecked. Then there was a couple of massive explosions that turned everything in the human remains to dust, but allowed Fergie's little red doll and the vicious joke to be perfectly intact. And
everything's to dust, George. Everything. There was nothing left.
That's right. And
except this doll and a paper passport, we're supposed to believe.
And Peter here has shown me the footage of the CIA operatives spreading the wreckage.
Yeah.
To make it look as if there was actually you know, wreckage from planes in the rubble. No detectable human remains at all, but the little woolly doll is perfect. And how they have the conscience to do that, and then to put Mike Tyndall into a civil marriage with the daughter of Princess Anne, just so the Tyndall airbase can be covered up. Can you tell me a little bit more about the operations that were going on that day and the people that were complicit in the whole scam to bring the buildings down? You know, you don't know the military office bearers that were sent across the Atlantic so that they could not be found in charge of their own air force on that very important day?
Well, I know there was the guy called, what's his name? John Bonet.
Oh yeah.
They basically kidnapped his child and murdered her, and that got him out of the theatre of operations.
And I've just noticed that I've defamed a man called Larry Summers for coercing people, but I believe that the man that did the coercion in the lead up to this event was Larry King. Have you heard of him?
Yes, yeah.
So he's the psychologist who does the coercion bureaus. You know, he catches them naked with young children, or he catches them naked in a homosexual act, and that's the way that he gets them to participate in full. And I've got a picture on my website of the Duke of York with the US Secretary of Defence Leon Panetta commemorating the 100th anniversary of the naval aviation at the National Building Museum in 2011, and I believe that's the year that Prince Andrew began to get the pressure that made him step down as the head of the trade delegation. It's amazing that with all that scrutiny by all those investigative journalists all over the globe, that the man was able to hold on so long. I believe that Fergie's busted, and you understand also how they brought in obfuscation tools for Fergie at Manchester United, the woman with the big tits, shagging all the players at the same time. I should not say shagging, I should say having sexual intercourse with some of them Manchester United and Ingenious Films LLP multi-millionaires. Because Fergie, her real name was, she's from your region, Sarah somebody Price.
She's from my region, what, Sussex?
No, she's from the Brighton or South Coast region.
Yes.
Katie Price.
Yes.
Is the real name of the Fergie with the big tits. She got all sorts of silicone jobs so that she could be a sensational diversion from the other Fergie who did the toe sucking, so that she could be a diversion from the fact that she was bankrupt, she was divorced. For reputational reasons they had to get rid of her, but they were still prepared to make that vicious joke after the terror campaign that they had sponsored and planned with the Prime Minister's missus. And all of this is now openly understood by all of the free world, which is why one of the pages on my website shows Princess Anne prepared to eat horse meat. I'll get that page up now. Sorry, have you got anything to add on anything else that occurred on that 9/11 day? What was all this stuff about the...
Sorry George, you're cutting out a bit, and I don't want to switch windows, because when I start switching windows I get dropped out. So I've got nothing in front, but most of the stuff I know is just off the top of my head.
Alright, there was a lot of conjecture about adjacent buildings and about there being gold stashes in the adjacent buildings.
There was gold stored below the Twin Towers, and it'd been blocked in. In fact, I'm going to put a link on the bottom of this video, because the mafia were involved with this.
Well, we've described the mafia already. You're talking about the British royals, the British government, the wives of the British government. You don't get closer to the mafia than that. The Chip and Norton set is the mafia. As you know.
I know that. But they also worked with the so-called mafia, because one of the mafia bosses was instrumental in the building of those Twin Towers.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the link in at the bottom so that people understand what actually went on. But the only way they could get that gold out was to detonate those buildings.
Okay, so when we began to report all of this and repost all of Greg Hallett's story, when the planes went missing, they could not find the planes, despite searches, with intensive searches, with the whole of the world's media up in aircraft looking for the planes. Greg Hallett's drug stashes that were put in the South Pacific by the British Navy were detectable within 2.5 hours by sonar buoy. And when we begin to proclaim again everything that Greg Hallett has revealed, let me tell you how Princess Anne reacted. Just listen to this.
Princess Anne has spoken in favour of genetically modified crops despite her brother Prince Charles opposing the practice. In an interview with the BBC's Country File, the Princess Royal defended GM crops as a more efficient use of the land in helping feed the global population. She also gave her views on eating horse meat and the badger calf.
Gas is a much nicer way of doing it, if that's not a silly expression, because of the way it works. And how it works is that you go to sleep. Prospect.
So she's all for keeping the numbers down. This is exactly the same time when her family were so nervous about what they were exposed as doing and as covering up, since Queen Victoria had all those illegitimate children.
9.
Yeah. Crack shot Harry, pictured on the front page of a national newspaper with a dead buffalo at his feet. You remember the stories about Prince Philip and the tiger that were published in the 1960s?
World Wildlife Fund.
Yeah, now they've got the kids playing that role on screen, and I'm now scrolling down to all Greg Hallett's images about the illegitimacy of those bloodlines, about Simon Day in Australia with those horribly painful operations to his eyes and his ears to make him not look any longer like Prince Charles or Camilla, his mum.
That's right, they pinned his hair back.
Yeah. And when the royals hear all of that being discussed in videos like this, then they panic. When we talked about Cressida Dick in the 7/7 murders by the intel people and the British police force in the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick led that campaign in the region where you were on the day, I believe.
Yeah, I went through Edgware Road. I used to go through there twice a day, George.
When that news was reposted, Prince Harry, within 36 hours, is dating a girl called Cressida.
Exactly.
And you know how, when the laws of succession were about to be changed to protect this family in the midst of this massive fraud, that what they did was they picked a commoner as quickly as they possibly could, and they got her into the wedding ceremony so that the whole thing could carry on in the same scandalous way that it has done since that young child was born to Queen Victoria when she was aged 14 on the Isle of Wight.
Yep.
That was the last legitimate claimant to the throne from this bloodline, and he was killed by one of his cousins, the fat bloke who was as round as he was tall. I forget which king it was or which prince it was, but he murdered Marcus Manuel, the person that was born to blind King George of Cumbria and Queen Victoria on the Isle of Wight. And the whole sad story is a story that allows these batards to own the whole world, to be greedy and lazy, but to be capable of killing 3,000 people in one premeditated act as they laugh about the creation of the museum.
And let's not forget, George, these bastards have committed, they murdered millions.
In World War II.
I mean, it's beyond words, George.
And, you know, the more we get people making videos that confirm this, because I believe that Greg Hallett has been murdered by these people, and by David Cameron, who you were hitting on earlier. He was the Prime Minister, he was the person who was the recipient of the lawsuit that was broadcast to thousands and thousands of listeners.
That's all on film, that's all documented.
And Greg's books have been sold to millions of people. So I just want the public to understand that what happened in World War II was not an accident. It's entirely for profit. because we understand the Fleming family, the Bond jokes, the Operation Winnie the Pooh, the Mountbatten files, the reports that came out about the drug running exercises and about the massive killing and the double agent penetration of every side in World War II, so that nobody, a loyalist, you could not be sure if you were a successful general and you were a leader of people in Germany or Free France or anywhere across Europe, you did not know whether you were coming or going, because the leadership team was in it entirely for profit, and they profit from the leafy lanes of Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire, where there is no bombing. And
that's right.
That is shared, that status is shared with Göttingen and Heidelberg in Germany, where if you look at the chancellors in Germany, almost all of them have come from those two institutions.
Yep.
It's an entire stitch up, entirely for profit, by national traitors. Shall we stop there and let the world think about the implications of this?
Okay.
If you listen to the news on the radio tomorrow morning, this will be all over. Radio 4, BBC 2, every news bulletin you hear, right up to midday, will be about cover-ups for everything we have talked about in this discussion.
Yeah, because the bastards are listening to everything we say.
That's right, and they are now fearful for their lives.
Yes, yeah.
They're mistreating the troops who are out there in action. Last night I spent a lot of time with people who have served for 10 years in Iraq in the SAS. They're really angry that they have to work like slaves to keep their job and earn a pittance.
Yeah, well,
these are multi-billionaires we're talking about. National traitors, national leaders, lauded and loved for laughing at the killings and the genocidal deaths of innocent youngsters who fight for their country, who are actually fighting to protect national traitors at the top of society.
You should say that, George, because I posted today on my Facebook the fact that there were some angry bastards, and I happen to know for a fact that David Cameron and Tony Blair have been painted.
Painted?
Yes.
Tainted or painted?
Painted. They've already been painted. You know, it's a military term. They use a laser. And once you've got a dot on someone's head, all you have to do then is pull the trigger. Those guys have both been painted at least a dozen times.
So what, this is an execution route?
Yeah, better believe it. Their bodyguards are going to be ordered to stand down. I'm not going to tell you the time and the date, but I'm telling you now. You see,
this is what they do in wartime. I do not approve of this. You should ban. If David Cameron has 10 body doubles, you need to find out which one is the right David Cameron and jail him and persecute him for him. Because when you start killing people, that's when the double agents kick in and the innocents get killed. The villains survive it all because they're trained to kill, as you know. So I'd much rather have the priests.
That's why they've only been painted, because they know they can be taken out any time.
Right. I don't understand that technology, but we'll stop recording now and you can explain that to me after we've done that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? So thank you for your help.
Okay, George, no problems, mate. We'll keep